Okay, let me ask you this. Would you rather have a permanently itching forehead or have to sing everything you say? Now that sounds like, a classic silly would you rather, right?
Yeah.
The kind of thing you maybe bat around with friends late at night or maybe hear on some quirky game show. But what if I told you that this seemingly simple game, the one we often just dismiss as juvenile or, just plain absurd, is actually, well, it's a powerful, almost profound tool. It's this fascinating lens that reveals so much about human psychology, about social dynamics, even the history of thought itself. It really does kind of flip the whole idea of a game right on its head. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We love peeling back the layers on everyday stuff to, well, uncover the extraordinary hiding underneath. Today, we're diving deep into the comedy and psychology of Would You Rather, and our mission, really, is to take you on this comprehensive journey. We'll dig into its surprising history, delve into the brain science behind why it's just so appealing, explore how it shows up everywhere in modern media, confront the controversies it sometimes sparks, because yeah, it does, and ultimately equip you, whether you're a creator or just curious, with the knowledge to maybe wield it responsibly. We're drawing from this incredible expert researcher's deep dive. It's this rich blend of storytelling, analysis, timelines, little case study vignettes, core theories, and some really concrete takeaways. So this isn't just about fun facts, it's about giving you a shortcut to being really well informed about why these questions resonate so deeply. We're blending historical context, psychological theories, practical insights, the whole 9 yards. So let's just dive right in. Okay, close your eyes for a sec. Let's set the scene. Forget the podcast studio. Imagine maybe a cozy Victorian drawing room. You got the soft lamplight, maybe the quiet clinking of brandy glasses. You know the vibe. And people are passing the time with riddles, paradoxes, these playful hypotheticals. This impulse, this need to pose either choices, to present a dilemma and demand a decision, it isn't some fleeting modern trend, is it? It feels like something more fundamental.
Oh, absolutely. It's fundamental. A core part of how we communicate, how we teach, how we interact socially, and it stretches back way, way further than those charming Victorian parlor games you mentioned.
Okay, so how far back are we talking? Like really ancient?
We're talking really ancient, millennia. If we look back to ancient and classical times, you find philosophers like Socrates using hypotheticals all the time. His famous method, the elenchus, it wasn't about entertainment at all. It was a form of cooperative argumentative dialogue, basically designed to stimulate critical thinking, to illuminate ideas.
Right, the Socratic method, asking questions to get people to think.
Exactly. And he posed these contrived choices, these thought experiments. Think of something like the ship of Theseus, the one where you ponder if a ship, after having all its parts replaced over time, is still the same ship.
Yeah, I remember that one from philosophy class. Your brain hurt a bit.
Right. And these weren't for laughs. They were potent teaching tools. You could call them early cousins of Would You Rather, really. They were designed to reveal underlying values, ethical intuitions, the very nature of identity, They forced people to confront their assumptions by presenting a binary choice, a dilemma that made them examine what they truly believed.
So the very first Would You Rather wasn't a game at all, but more like a philosophical scalpel, designed to dissect your deepest values. That completely flips the script.
Pretty much, yeah. A tool for intellectual and moral exploration.
Did it ever get controversial? Even back then, were there like Socrates Would You Rather questions that cause a big stir?
Well, Socrates himself was certainly no stranger to stirring controversy with his probing questions. That was kind of his thing. While we don't have records of, specific ancient Greek Would You Rather games, the very act of elenchus was often disruptive. It was designed to expose inconsistencies in people's beliefs. It was meant to make them uncomfortable, to challenge their certainty, and that inherently led to friction. So it shows that even way back then, these kinds of forced choice questions had a really powerful, sometimes unsettling impact.
Wow. So this format has always had a bit of an edge to it. What happened after the ancient Greeks? Did it just disappear for a while?
Not at all. It just adapted. Moving into the medieval and early modern periods, this structured form of dilemma kept evolving. You see it popping up in religious and legal pedagogy. So think detailed case studies used to teach law or ethics. Students would grapple with these fictional but kind of realistic scenarios that required moral judgment.
Okay, like practice for real life.
Exactly. And it also appeared in confessors' manuals, where priests would guide individuals through moral quandaries, sometimes presenting them with these either choices to help them clarify their conscience. Even just in the broader culture, folktales, parables, they frequently used these pick an option plot devices. They forced characters, and by extension the audience, right, to grapple with difficult, sometimes morally ambiguous choices. These were less about humor back then and more about moral instruction, illustrating consequences, teaching virtues through stories.
So it was serious business for a long time. When did the fun part start creeping in? The parlor games?
Right. That's where the 18th and 19th centuries really come in. That's when the playful element starts to take hold, especially with the rise of parlor games. These were super popular social gatherings, right? Charades, riddles, various questions games. They became common entertainment in middle and upper class European and American society. And here, these playful hypotheticals served as diversionary wit, just a way to be clever and pass the time. But what's really fascinating about this era, and you hinted at this earlier, is how these games often blurred the line between just amusement and actual moral instruction.
So it wasn't just fun and games.
Not entirely. They weren't just about pure fun. They were also about subtly probing and, reinforcing societal values, gently guiding participants toward what was considered proper or good behavior through the choices they made.
So wait, you're telling me those seemingly innocent Victorian parlor games had this sort of hidden curriculum, like they were sneakily shaping people's moral compass while everyone thought they were just having a laugh? That's brilliant, actually, and a little bit sneaky.
It is brilliant. It's a fantastic example of how culture uses play to transmit values, often without people even realizing it. And that either format was incredibly effective for doing just that.
Okay, so Victorian moral lessons disguised as fun. Where did it go from there into the 20th century?
Yeah, as we transition into the 20th century, the format adapts again, this time to new media, and with remarkable fluidity. It finds its way onto radio, onto television variety shows, providing these quick, engaging segments that really captivated audiences.
I can picture that. Quick little bits between acts.
Exactly. And then you have comedy clubs, improv theaters, especially places like Chicago's Second City. They started to refine the art of spontaneous hypothetical humor. Performers would just riff off the cuff, creating hilarious, often completely absurd scenarios on the spot. They tapped into that immediate audience connection and reaction that Would You Rather is so good at generating. It just proved its adaptability time and time again.
From philosophy to moral lessons to improv comedy, that's quite a journey already. And then came the internet, right? I imagine that changed everything.
Oh, absolutely. The late 20th and especially the 21st century saw an absolute explosion, largely fueled by digital technology. First, you had board games and party games capitalizing on the format, turning it into a structured group activity you could buy and play at home. Like Would You Rather, the game.
Yeah, I've played a few of those.
Right. But it was the internet, with its early forums, then social media platforms, that dramatically accelerated its distribution. Suddenly, these questions could spread globally in an instant, reaching millions.
Total game changer.
Completely. And today, podcasts, live streams, they've totally embraced hypothetical debating. It's become this beloved, recurring segment that audiences actively anticipate. They participate in the chat. They send in their own questions. It's just a testament to its enduring appeal, really.
So we've truly come full circle, haven't we? From profound philosophical discourse in ancient Greece to a lively party game going viral on TikTok. It's astonishing how deeply ingrained this format is in just human interaction. But what's the real magic here? Why do our brains light up when we hear these questions? What's the psychological secret sauce that makes us genuinely want to choose between a permanently itchy forehead or singing everything we say? Let's actually unpack the psychology of it all.
Yeah, I always wonder about that. Why is choosing between two equally absurd, sometimes frankly gross, or even unpleasant scenarios so incredibly engaging, even hilarious? On the surface, it seems so simple, but I'm guessing there's a lot going on in our minds, maybe in our social interactions too, when we play Would You Rather.
You're absolutely spot on. The appeal is it's deeply rooted in our human cognition and our social interaction. It makes it far more than just some trivial game. This game, and let's be honest, we all call it a game, it's actually plugging straight into how our brains are wired and how we interact socially. It's way more than just a trivial time killer, Okay, break it down for me. What's happening psychologically?
All right, let's start with the psychology. A core element of comedy, something called incongruity and resolution, is absolutely at play here. This theory suggests that humor arises from unexpected juxtapositions. Basically, when two things that don't quite fit together are suddenly slammed together.
Like peanut butter and pickles. Okay, maybe not that, but...
Exactly. Would You Rather excels at this. It pairs familiar categories, food, body functions, fame, whatever, in really novel or absurd ways. And our minds, they instinctively try to resolve that mismatch to make sense of the absurdity. That often results in this kind of aha moment, or maybe an oh wow moment, that manifests as laughter. Like choosing between always smelling faintly of garlic or always getting a tiny static shock when you touch metal, it's the clashing of these mundane irritants in a totally unexpected way that sparks that cognitive resolution and often a chuckle. Your brain just kind of crashes for a second trying to process the ridiculousness.
So it's the shock of the ridiculous that gets us. My brain literally short circuits trying to compute sing everything you say.
Precisely. Your brain sees two things that definitely don't belong together, tries to make sense of the mismatch, and bam, that aha moment often comes out as a laugh. And building on that, there's the benign violation theory. This was developed by Peter McGraw and his colleagues. This theory basically posits that humor emerges when something is simultaneously a violation, meaning it's weird, wrong, threatening, maybe taboo, and it's benign, meaning it's safe, non-threatening, it's okay to engage with.
Okay, violation, but a safe violation.
Exactly. And absurd hypothetical questions often sit squarely in that sweet spot. They let us explore the transgressive, the gross, maybe the morally ambiguous, without any real-world consequence. You can discuss the most disgusting hypothetical scenario, knowing full well you'll never actually have to, live it. This allows for a safe kind of emotional exploration of boundaries.
Okay, that makes sense. So if it's supposed to be benign, is there a point where a hypothetical becomes too close to a real-world violation, where the humor just evaporates, even for people who normally like dark comedy?
Absolutely. That's the critical line, isn't it? If the violation part feels too real, too threatening, or maybe too personal for someone in the room, it stops being benign. And therefore, it stops being funny. It just becomes upsetting or offensive. The perceived safety of the hypothetical is totally paramount for the humor to land.
Gotcha. Safety first, even in comedy. What else is going on in our heads?
Well, then there's self-projection and identity signaling. This is a big one. The choices we make, and maybe even more importantly, the reasons we give for those choices, they reveal a lot about who we are. Our personality, our values, our risk thresholds, our priorities, even our particular brand of humor. It's all on display.
It's a little personality test.
Kind of. When you say, okay, I'd rather have the itching forehead because at least I can scratch it, unlike singing every single word. You're not just making a choice. You're signaling your approach to problem solving, maybe your tolerance for public embarrassment versus physical discomfort. And listeners or fellow players, they actively read these cues, they're updating their social impressions, forming opinions about you. It's a really low-stakes, incredibly efficient way to understand who someone truly is, or at least how they want to be perceived.
So we're constantly judging each other's answers, subtly.
Well, maybe not judging, but definitely interpreting. We're gathering social data. It also taps into cognitive play. Engaging with these questions isn't passive at all. It actively fires up our problem-solving skills and engages in what psychologists call counterfactual thinking.
Counterfactual, like what if?
Exactly. That's where your brain lights up, running these what-if simulations. Okay, if I pick the itching forehead, will I scratch it raw? Will people stare? If I sing everything, will I sound like a opera star? Just incredibly annoying.
Probably annoying.
Probably. But you're essentially testing these alternate realities and their potential consequences in your head, which is an intrinsically rewarding form of cognitive stimulation. It's like a puzzle for our social and ethical brains, but, a really fun one.
Okay, so it's mentally stimulating too. Any other psychological hooks?
Yeah, one more key one is emotional release. Think about the really gross options, or the unsettling ones, or the morally ambiguous ones. They provide this safe, contained space to explore taboo feelings or discuss uncomfortable topics without any real-world implications. This can be genuinely cathartic, actually. You can laugh about something truly disgusting or something that feels maybe a little bit transgressive, releasing tension, all within the safety of a hypothetical scenario. It's like a pressure release valve for our social anxieties or just our weird thoughts.
Wow, okay, that's a lot going on in our heads. Incongruity, benign violation, identity signaling, cognitive play, emotional release. It makes total sense we're hardwired for this on an individual level, but would you rather is almost always a group activity, isn't it? What happens when you throw other people into the mix? Does that change the game entirely? How does the social aspect work?
Oh, it absolutely does. The sociology of the game is just as crucial, and it adds whole new layers to the appeal. It's not just you versus the question. It's you, the question, and everyone else listening.
Right. So what happens socially?
Firstly, Would You Rather is a fantastic tool for group bonding. Seriously.
Right.
Rapid-fire hypotheticals are excellent for fostering affiliation, shared laughter, friendly teasing, even these mock debates over who made the right absurd choice. They can quickly create inside jokes, establish group dynamics, and really strengthen social bonds.
Yeah, I can see that. You learn who's on your wavelength.
Exactly. It's like a small ritual that builds camaraderie. You learn who among your friends shares your particular brand of dark humor, or who has a surprisingly pragmatic approach to completely absurd dilemmas. These small shared experiences contribute to a sense of belonging. I can totally see that with my own friends. The choices reveal everything.
Definitely. You find your tribe based on whether they'd rather fight a horse-sized duck or 10 duck-sized horses.
Precisely. And it also functions as a powerful tool for norm negotiation. Imagine a new group playing, right? If a would you rather about, say, a slightly transgressive prank gets groans from half the table.
Uh-oh.
You've just learned a shared boundary, a collective norm.
Yeah.
And nobody had to give a lecture about it. These games act as a social barometer, spotlighting cultural norms within that particular group. What makes people laugh versus what makes them cringe reveals what's considered taboo, acceptable, or just plain funny within that specific social context.
It's like mapping the group's unwritten rules on the fly.
Exactly. And finally, it serves as a mechanism for gatekeeping and identity. Your reactions to certain questions, who you align with, who you laugh with, it can signal belonging to specific subgroups, whether that's age cohorts, maybe political identities, certain subcultures. It's a subtle way of affirming collective identity and understanding the group's internal boundaries. It helps people identify their people, and who fits within those boundaries. For instance, if a question about a particular niche interest gets a certain reaction, it instantly tells you who's in the know.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about my choice, but how my choice fits into the group dynamic, how it signals who I am in relation to everyone else. Could it ever be too revealing, though? Like accidentally exposing something someone didn't really want to share, even in a hypothetical context?
Oh, it definitely can. While it feels low stakes, the lines we draw, or the things we absolutely refuse to choose between, can sometimes reveal deep-seated anxieties or intensely personal values.
Right.
That's why context and having a safe, trusting environment are so important when playing. It just shows how powerful this simple format can be as a social microscope, for better or worse.
It truly is. Okay, so these profound psychological and sociological impacts really explain why Would You Rather isn't just some relic of the past, but it continues to thrive and evolve in our modern, hyper-connected world. It seems almost perfectly built for the way we interact today, especially online. And you've definitely seen it, right? Like a short, punchy clip from a podcast featuring a killer would you rather question just suddenly explodes. It goes viral across TikTok, Instagram, everywhere. People are tagging the friends, adding their own captions, stitching the audio into totally new content. This format isn't just popular, it feels almost perfectly built for the digital age. It's like a true engine for virality.
It absolutely is. That's a great way to put it, an engine for virality. The format's inherent shareability and interactivity are precisely what make it so effective and culturally influential today. It's practically a content creator's dream because it immediately sparks a reaction, an opinion, a comment.
So how does it typically show up today? Where are we seeing it most?
Well, probably the most obvious place is short-form video platforms. Think TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. They are just tailor-made for Would You Rather. Those 15 to 60-second dilemma clips. They're incredibly snackable content. They grab your attention instantly, present a clear, concise choice, and then the comment sections just blow up.
Oh yeah, the comments are half the fun sometimes.
Totally.
Yeah.
It becomes this huge crowdsourced debate hall where people weigh in with their own answers, their own rationales, often arguing with each other. It just amplifies engagement exponentially. And the visual element, even if it's just someone reacting hilariously to the question, adds another layer of immediate appeal.
Makes sense. What about longer stuff like podcasts?
Yeah, for longer form content like podcasts and live streams, the Would You Rather segment provides fantastic rhythm. It can act as a perfect palate cleanser between heavier or more serious topics, offering a moment of levity, a mental break for the listeners. It's also a really reliable, crowd-pleasing, recurring bit that listeners genuinely look forward to. Many shows have built entire segments, sometimes even entire episodes, around these types of questions because they pretty much guarantee engagement and create these memorable, shareable moments. They're instant conversation starters for the hosts and the audience.
Yeah, it breaks things up nicely, keeps it from getting too dry.
Exactly. And beyond just passive consumption, Would You Rather is frequently integrated into interactive formats. This is where it gets really interesting for engagement. Imagine watching a live stream where viewers can vote live on the choices and the hosts have to react to the audience's decision in real time. Or maybe donors get to buy the right to pose a dilemma directly to the hosts, creating this personalized connection.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah. And some creators even weave these games into exclusive Patreon membership tiers, offering special Would You Rather sessions just for their supporters. This fosters deeper community engagement, making the audience feel like they're truly part of the show, even influencing the content. It moves from being just a game to a powerful community-building tool.
Okay, so it's not just content, it's community building too. What about actual games?
Naturally, yeah. The mechanics of Would You Rather have found their way into game design and entertainment more broadly. There are countless party games, board games out there that are essentially variations of Would You Rather. They offer a structured and often hilarious way for friends to engage in social play. They basically capitalize on that inherent human enjoyment of pondering absurd dilemmas in a shared setting, just packaged up nicely for your next game night.
Right, those are everywhere. But is it always just for fun? Are there any serious uses?
Surprisingly, yes. There are even constructive uses for modified, kind of sanitized hypotheticals. They're used in educational settings, even professional training. For example, they can help develop judgment under uncertainty in, say, leadership training scenarios, forcing quick decisions with ethical dimensions. Or they can facilitate ethics teaching in professional development courses by presenting moral quandaries in an engaging, non-threatening way.
Huh, like, would you rather prioritize shareholder value or employee well-being in this specific crisis kind of thing?
Exactly. These scenarios can build empathy by forcing participants to consider difficult choices from different perspectives. It really demonstrates the format's surprising versatility beyond pure entertainment. It shows how you can adapt the core mechanism for serious learning and reflection.
That is versatile. Okay, so it's showing up everywhere, from TikTok to training seminars. How does this widespread presence influence broader culture? You mentioned memes and shorthand earlier.
Yeah, it has a significant impact there. Specific hypothetical setups, or maybe their particularly memorable outcomes from a popular show, can quickly become viral memes and cultural shorthand. A particular question or a funny answer someone gave can just enter the lexicon. It influences how we communicate online. People will reverence that one would you rather question in totally different contexts, knowing others will immediately get the implication or the type of dilemma being invoked. It becomes a shared cultural reference point.
Like an inside joke for millions.
Pretty much. And it also plays a powerful role in political and pop culture commentary. Satire loves hypotheticals. They're used constantly to expose absurdities in current events or public discourse. Questions like, would you rather support politician X's terrible policy or politician Y's equally terrible policy, can be absurd on the surface, but incredibly revealing about underlying societal tensions or political stances.
Right. It forces you to confront the absurdity of the choices sometimes offered.
Exactly. It's a way of highlighting ridiculousness or hypocrisy in certain positions without being overly preachy or didactic. It forces a choice that, by its very nature, critiques the options available, often sparking viral debates and commentary online.
Okay, so Would You Rather has truly become this digital age powerhouse. It's perfectly adapted for virality. It influences how we connect, how we comment on the world. But, and there's always a but, right? This incredible reach and influence, of course, also opens the door to controversy, potential pitfalls. When something spreads this fast and wide, especially online, it's got to come with its own set of problems, doesn't it? Where do things typically go wrong? When does the fun stop being fun?
Okay, so we've talked about the fun, the psychology behind it, the incredible viral power. But imagine when you have something this potent, especially online where things can spiral fast, it's got to come with its own set of problems. It feels like maybe a bit of a minefield that content creators and even just casual players need to learn how to navigate carefully. Where do things usually go wrong? You've hit on a really crucial point there. There are definitely important ethical considerations and some common misconceptions surrounding how we use hypotheticals, especially in public forums where they can reach such a vast audience.
Right.
And yes, that line between playful and harmful is far, far too easy to cross if you're not careful.
So what are the main controversies we see popping up?
Well, a significant issue revolves around the distinction between punching down versus punching up in comedy. You hear this discussed a lot. The line between playful and genuinely harmful is often crossed when hypotheticals start reinforcing stereotypes or, worse, target vulnerable groups.
Right.
What might start as an attempt at edgy comedy can quickly shift to cruelty or marginalization if the subject of the joke or the dilemma is already in a position of lesser power or social standing. For example, a question that relies on a negative stereotype about a particular ethnicity or gender or sexuality. It just stops being funny. It starts being genuinely harmful. It ceases to be humor when it makes someone feel less than or reinforces prejudice.
That's a really important line to watch. What else?
Another serious concern is the potential for normalization of taboo subjects. If we keep joking about really dark stuff, extreme violence, certain kinds of harm, are we essentially training ourselves, or maybe our kids, to think it's somehow okay or even normal?
Desensitization.
Exactly. Repeated exposure to extreme or morally questionable hypotheticals, particularly those involving real harm or suffering, can desensitize audiences over time. This can start to blur the lines between fictional absurdity and real-world consequences. It might subtly shift our collective perception of what is acceptable to laugh about or even just think about, without that crucial benign part of the benign violation theory still holding up. If the violation stops feeling benign because it's presented so casually so often, that's a problem.
Yeah, the context really matters there.
Absolutely. And then there's the issue of consent and emotional safety. This is huge, especially in live or unmoderated settings like online chats or even just parties. Some hypotheticals, even if they seem abstract and harmless to the person asking, can inadvertently trigger trauma for audience members without any warning. A question that seems totally detached from reality to one person might directly relate to a lived, incredibly painful experience for another.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you never know what someone's been through.
Exactly. This is a crucial consideration for creators who genuinely want to foster a safe and inclusive environment. You never truly know who is in your audience, what their personal history might be. So you have to be incredibly careful and thoughtful about the potential impact of your words, even in a seemingly lighthearted context.
That's a really important reminder. It's not just about what you find funny, but what might genuinely impact someone else listening or playing along. So it sounds like creators really need to understand what works and what definitely doesn't. What about some of the common myths people seem to hold about these types of questions, things that maybe lead them astray?
Yeah, there are a few widely held beliefs that really need to be debunked, because they often lead creators down problematic paths, thinking they're being edgy when they're just being, well, harmful.
Okay, like what?
Well, one really common myth is that all taboo content is inherently edgy and therefore funny. This is just a dangerous oversimplification. The reality is, context matters hugely. The target of the humor matters. The audience's values matter. Jokes that rely on the suffering or marginalization of vulnerable groups are almost always corrosive and alienating, not genuinely funny to a broad, thoughtful audience. True edginess often comes from intelligent subversion, right? From challenging power structures in a clever way, not from simply being offensive for the sake of being offensive. There's a huge difference between a clever, transgressive joke and just being cruel or lazy.
So it's not enough just to be dark or shocking. The intention and the target are absolutely key.
Precisely. And another related myth is that the more extreme the hypothetical, the funnier the result. Like, just dial everything up to 11.
Yeah, go for maximum gross out or violence.
Right. But that's not necessarily true. While shock can certainly elicit a reaction, maybe a gasp, maybe nervous laughter, true, sustained humor often relies more on careful audience calibration. It relies on what we sometimes call the mental image economy.
Mental image economy? What's that?
It's basically how vividly and, crucially, how comically a scenario is imagined in the listener's head. Is the picture you paint inherently funny in its absurdity or just disturbing? And humor also relies on precise timing, on the delivery. Just going for over-the-top extremism can quickly lead to diminishing returns, or frankly, just disgust. There's usually a sweet spot. Going way beyond it often just makes people uncomfortable or tune out rather than genuinely amused. A well-crafted, slightly absurd scenario often works much better than one that's just trying to be maximally gross or violent purely for shock value. It's about sparking the imagination in a funny way, not just the gag reflex.
Those are really critical distinctions. It's about being clever and imaginative, not just outrageous or offensive. Are there any maybe lesser-known truths about crafting these hypotheticals that we might not typically consider? Things that actually enhance the humor in unexpected ways?
Yes, absolutely. And one is a bit paradoxical. Constraint often breeds creativity.
How so? Like rules make it funnier.
Kind of. When creators operate within specific boundaries, like maybe time limits for answering or explicit rules against certain types of offensiveness, they're often forced to be more inventive, more clever. This pressure can lead to funnier and more self-aware answers than those who just rely on pure shock value without any guiding principles. It pushes you to think outside the usual box, to find the unexpected twist within the limitations, which can be much more satisfying comedically.
Okay, so boundaries aren't just for safety, they can actually spark better comedy. Interesting. Anything else?
Yeah, and this might seem counterintuitive too, but moral reflection can actually enhance humor. Sometimes. When hypotheticals prompt thoughtful, self-aware responses that go beyond just the immediate gross-out reaction, they often leave a more lasting and memorable comedic impression. The humor comes from the nuanced exploration of the choice, from the clever rationale someone provides, not just the initial visceral reaction to the dilemma itself.
So the why becomes funnier than the what.
Exactly. It's about the journey of making the decision and the wit involved in explaining it that truly resonates and often gets the bigger laugh in the end.
That's a really profound thought. It's not just the punchline, but the whole thought process that can make it truly memorable and funny. Okay, these tensions between humor, harm, ethical responsibility, they've clearly led experts from various fields to weigh in on would you rather, offering different frameworks and cautions for its use. So let's maybe explore those different expert lenses now. Okay, so with so much potentially at stake here, ranging from just pure entertainment and group bonding all the way to causing genuine harm or influencing cultural norms, it's really no surprise that academics, cultural critics, ethicists, they've all examined would you rather from their own angles. It really is this fascinating little microcosm of human behavior, isn't it? Ripe for different interpretations.
Indeed it is. And different disciplines offer these distinct lenses through which we can view the impact and the implications of these hypothetical scenarios. Looking through these different lenses gives us a much more complete picture of why they resonate the way they do and what effects they might be having.
So what are some of the main viewpoints out there? How do psychologists or sociologists tend to see it?
Well, from a fairly mainstream viewpoint, those core psychological frameworks we discussed earlier, incongruity and benign violation, they remain pretty central. They explain that the element of surprise you get from these incongruous pairings, coupled with that safe, non-threatening context, is fundamental to why these games are usually perceived as funny, rather than just disturbing or weird. Remember, if that violation isn't benign, if it feels too real or too threatening, it ceases to be humor and becomes something else entirely, like an actual threat or an insult or just plain uncomfortable.
Right, the benign part is key.
Absolutely. And additionally, scholars who focus on social identity and signaling tend to emphasize how these would-you-rather games serve as this kind of low-stakes moral calibration device. They allow individuals to signal their in-group values, to test social boundaries, and to understand where they stand within social hierarchies, all very quickly. This reinforces group cohesion for those who align on the answers or the humor, and it highlights differences for those who don't. It's a really quick, efficient way to establish rapport and belonging within a community, a subtle way of saying, hey, these are my people, and this is what we find funny or acceptable.
That makes a lot of sense, especially now when identity feels so central to how we interact, how we consume content online. But what about more critical views or alternative perspectives? Do some scholars see a definite downside to how prevalent this format has become?
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely critical perspectives. Cultural critics, for instance, often argue that the sheer prevalence of these hypotheticals, especially in their short, viral, easily digestible formats, perfectly mirrors the dynamics of what they call the late-stage attention economy.
Okay, meaning?
Meaning, they suggest these quick, provocative little moments are designed primarily to reward engagement and virality above all else. But often, that comes at the cost of nuance, of deeper thought, of context. This can potentially erode thoughtful discourse over time, reducing complex issues, or even just interesting ideas to these simple binary choices, without any real space for exploration or reflection. It's the ultimate snackable content, right? But sometimes a snack just isn't enough when maybe we need a full meal of ideas.
Trading depth for clicks, essentially.
That's one critique, yes. And ethicists, they certainly raise cautions. They warn against the normalization of immoral or ethically fraught hypotheticals, especially when they're presented without proper framing or any follow-up discussion. While a classic philosophical question like the trolley problem, would you rather kill one stranger or let 5 die, can be incredibly rich and valuable in an academic or philosophical context where it's unpacked.
Right, where you discuss the reasoning.
Exactly. But just presenting that same question as pure entertainment, maybe on a game show or a TikTok clip, without any critical framing, without discussing its implications, without even acknowledging the profound moral dilemma it represents, that can be dangerous and desensitizing. It risks trivializing really serious moral concerns, turning ethics into just another bit.
That's a really powerful point. It highlights the responsibility creators have to consider the deeper impact, not just the immediate laugh or share. And it makes me wonder, what about cultural variations? We talked about social context, but does would you rather play out differently around the world, or is the appeal pretty much universal?
No, that's a vital question. It's absolutely crucial to recognize that the appeal and especially the interpretation of would you rather questions are not universal. Culture plays a massive, massive role in how these dilemmas are received and understood.
Okay, give me some examples. How might it differ?
All right, well, consider collectivist cultures, like many East Asian societies, for example. In cultures where maintaining public face, group harmony, social cohesion are paramount. Hypotheticals that force direct confrontation or highlight potential personal embarrassment or challenge group consensus might be much less popular, especially in public settings. They would likely be reserved for very close friends in private, to avoid causing discomfort or disrupting that social harmony. The goal isn't necessarily to stand out with a bold individual opinion, but to maintain respect and balance within the group.
Okay, so less focus on individual shock value, more on group comfort.
Generally speaking, yes. In contrast, look at individualist cultures, like the US and parts of Western Europe. These societies often tend to reward personal boldness, maybe contrarian humor, and the expression of extreme or edgy opinions. Individuality is often prized. This leads to a greater acceptance, sometimes even a demand for more provocative or outrageous hypotheticals. The individual's unique, maybe even shocking take is often celebrated rather than needing to harmonize perfectly with the group. This naturally leads to very different content styles and humor preferences.
That's a clear difference. What about religion or other cultural factors?
Big impact there too. Think about religiously conservative settings. In many such contexts, hypotheticals involving sexual themes or anything considered sacrilegious would be deeply taboo and highly offensive, not funny at all. Comedic styles in those settings would likely rely much more on absurdity that doesn't touch morality or clever wit or maybe observational humor rather than anything involving moral transgression or challenging established religious doctrine. And in certain honor cultures, dilemmas touching upon concepts of honor, shame, family reputation, they would carry significantly higher stakes. The exact same hypothetical question that might be seen as comedic and lighthearted in one cultural context could be perceived as deeply insulting, or could even provoke serious conflict in an honor-based culture. The perceived cost or implication of making a choice is fundamentally different depending on those cultural values.
Wow. Okay, so the key takeaway here, the sort of cross-cultural best practice, is you really, really have to know your audience.
Absolutely. Always localize your content. What lands as funny and harmless in one language, one community, one cultural context may be perceived as deeply offensive, confusing, or just plain taboo elsewhere. A deep understanding of your specific audience's cultural context is completely non-negotiable if you want to connect effectively and avoid causing unintended harm. It's not just about translating the words, it's about calibrating the cultural sensitivity.
That's such a crucial lesson for anyone creating content today, especially for a potentially global audience. You absolutely can't just assume everyone shares your sense of humor or your values. Okay, to truly grasp all these concepts, the psychology, the sociology, the cultural differences, the potential pitfalls, let's look at some real-world examples. I think seeing it in action, from viral hits to maybe some social missteps, will vividly illustrate the power and the peril of would you rather. Okay, theory's great, and understanding all those cultural nuances is absolutely essential, but sometimes seeing real-life examples just makes it all click, So we've got a few compelling case studies lined up that really show how would you rather can be used for massive viral success, how it can trigger a really uncomfortable social moment, or even how it can be used to facilitate serious ethical thinking. These should demonstrate the full spectrum of its impact.
Exactly. These vignettes are excellent demonstrations of the format's incredible versatility, but also its very real potential pitfalls. They really show the tangible consequences of getting the execution right or wrong.
All right, let's start with a success story. What's case study A?
Okay, case study A, the podcast minute that became a meme. This involved a mid-length podcast that had introduced this fun weekly segment they called Gross Roulette.
Gross Roulette. Okay, I'm intrigued already.
Yeah. The hosts would read listener-submitted hypotheticals, often related to bodily functions or just generally unpleasant things, all designed to be amusingly disgusting. One particular segment, this is the one that took off, asked listeners to choose between having a permanently itching forehead or having to sing everything they say.
Oh, our opening example.
That's the one. It was clipped, just that short segment, and it immediately went viral. It got shared across platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, everywhere. Audiences started adding their own spins, stitching the audio, creating remix memes. It was just inescapable for a while.
So why did that one blow up? What was the magic formula there?
Well, the analysis of its success is pretty clear looking back. Its virality was directly attributable to a few key factors working together. First, There was strong host chemistry. They clearly enjoyed bantering about it, which made the discussion engaging and just fun to listen to. Second, the clip itself was edited really well. Quick. Skillful editing made it punchy, concise, and incredibly shareable for short-form platforms. Third, there were inherent audio hooks within the scenario itself. The absurdity of singing everything or the relatable misery of an itch you can't ignore. They just encouraged repurposing and remixing. People immediately had a strong opinion. And psychologically, it tapped into that desire for incongruity perfectly, the absurd juxtaposition of the mundane and itch speaking with the ridiculous permanent singing. And it hit the benign violation sweet spot. It was gross or awkward enough to be a violation, but totally harmless and hypothetical enough to be benign. It created this perfect little comedic storm that just begged to be shared and debated.
That's a fantastic example of how to make it work, hitting all those psychological buttons, being shareable, having good delivery. But what about when it doesn't work so well? When does that benign, part of the benign violation theory just completely crumble?
All right. That brings us, unfortunately, to case study B, party game gone wrong. This happened at a private party. People were playing a casual round of Would You Rather. The questions were generally lighthearted, maybe a bit silly, until someone posed a hypothetical question that involved specific illegal behavior. It was intended as dark humor, probably.
Okay. I sense where this is going.
Yeah. Unbeknownst to the group, one of the guests at the party had direct, painful lived experience related to the exact topic that was being joked about in the hypothetical. This guest became visibly upset, understandably. The whole cheerful social dynamic just immediately shifted. Laughter completely faltered. The mood became incredibly tense and awkward, and some guests, feeling that profound discomfort in the room, actually chose to leave the party early. It just totally sucked the air out of the room and ended the night for some people.
Oh, wow. That's rough. What's the big lesson there?
The lesson learned here is absolutely critical, and it echoes what we talked about with emotional safety. Creators, hosts, even just people playing casually at a party, must be acutely aware of potential real-life triggers. What seems like an abstract, harmless, maybe even funny hypothetical to one person can carry immense emotional weight, even trauma, for another person in the same room or audience. In this scenario, what started as a benign violation for most of the group transformed instantly into a genuine threat or a painful reminder, a re-traumatization for one individual. It completely derailed the social interaction. It just highlights the absolute importance of empathy and awareness. You simply cannot know everyone's story or triggers.
That's such a stark reminder of the responsibility involved, even when you're just trying to have fun with friends. It just goes to show how quickly the mood can shift if you're not careful. Okay, but you also mentioned a constructive use for these types of questions earlier. How does that play out in a more serious, maybe educational context?
Right, for a more constructive illustration, we have case study C, ethical education. This happened in a university law class. The professor actually leveraged Would You Rather style scenarios, but with very careful design and clear intent. These were intentionally sanitized, removed from humor, and framed explicitly as thought experiments. The goal was to prompt students to think critically about complex trade-offs in public policy.
Like what kind of trade-offs?
For example, they might be asked to balance individual privacy rights versus public safety concerns in a specific hypothetical legal dilemma. It forced them to weigh competing values and consider the real-world implications of choosing one over the other.
So using the structure, but for serious debate.
Exactly. And the impact in this context was precisely as the professor intended. The scenario stimulated reflective debate, critical thinking, nuanced discussion among the students, rather than laughter. Students engaged in exploring the complexities of policy decisions, the ethical implications of different legal choices. This case study really demonstrates the remarkable versatility of the core Would You Rather format. It shows it can be a powerful tool for serious intellectual engagement, for developing moral reasoning, when it's intentionally designed and properly framed for a specific educational purpose. It moves far beyond mere entertainment to become a true pedagogical instrument.
Okay, these examples really hammer it home. While Would You Rather offers this immense potential for entertainment, virality, engagement, even education, it also carries significant risks if handled poorly. So, the big question for anyone listening who creates content or even just wants to use these questions more effectively in their own life, how can you harness its power for good and deliberately avoid those crucial pitfalls? How do you make it great? Right? You've seen the good, the bad, and the genuinely educational uses of Would You Rather. Now, for all the creators listening, podcasters, YouTubers, streamers, social media managers, even people just planning a game night, this is where the rubber really meets the road. If I'm trying to craft a great would you rather for my own content, how do I actually make it safe, genuinely funny, and truly engaging? It feels like it's not just about asking a random question, it's about carefully designing a memorable experience that resonates with my specific audience. Where do I start?
You're absolutely right. It requires intentional design, a good understanding of its mechanisms, and knowing your audience. This isn't just about throwing random, shocking things at a wall to see what sticks. It really is a craft when done well.
Okay, so where does that craft begin? Maybe understanding the pros and cons.
Exactly. So let's start with a clear-eyed critical analysis. Its benefits, its weaknesses, and its dangers. The strengths are pretty obvious by now, right? It's highly interactive and engaging. It naturally invites participation, whether that's in person or through online comments. It has really low production overhead, minimal resources needed, making it ideal for live formats, audio, short video. It reveals personality super quickly, which is great for establishing rapport with an audience or allowing guests to showcase their character. And as we saw, it's incredibly versatile. You can adapt it for silly, dark, but self-aware, philosophical, or satirical tones. It's like a Swiss Army knife for content creation.
Okay, those are compelling strengths. What about the downsides? The weaknesses?
It definitely has weaknesses. A heavy reliance on just shock value can lead to diminishing returns pretty quickly. Audiences get desensitized, and what felt edgy last week just feels boring or try-hard this week. There's a significant risk of alienating listeners if the content is miscalibrated to your audience's values. You can turn people off really fast if you cross a line they weren't expecting. And if you're not creative with the structure, it can become kind of surface level, devolving into predictable patterns or just uninspired choices that bore people rather than engage their imagination.
Right, you got to keep it fresh. And then the dangers. These feel more serious.
They are. The dangers are the ones creators absolutely must be acutely aware of, because the consequences can be severe. Careless or thoughtless hypotheticals risk reinforcing harmful stereotypes or normalizing violence or abuse against certain groups, even unintentionally. Unmoderated or overly sensitive content can inadvertently trigger trauma for individuals in the audience, which is a massive breach of the trust they place in you as a creator.
And you mentioned before, beyond just upsetting your audience, what about the real-world consequences for creators on platforms like YouTube or TikTok? Are there actual platform policy risks we need to highlight again here?
Absolutely, and it's worth repeating because it's so important. There are significant platform policy risks. Violating community guidelines, things like YouTube's or Twitch's rules on hate speech, harassment, dangerous acts, sexual content involving minors, or encouraging self-harm can lead to content removal, strikes against your channel, demonetization, or even permanent account suspension. These are not trivial concerns. They can literally end your ability to create and connect with your audience on that platform. So understanding the dangers isn't just about being ethical or considerate, it's also about protecting your work and your presence online.
Okay, message received loud and clear. Those are serious considerations. So, with all of that in mind, the good, the bad, the ugly, what are some practical rules of thumb? If I'm a writer or a host trying to craft a great Would You Rather segment, where do I actually begin the creative process?
All right, practical guidance. First, you need to set a clear tone and then stick to it. Decide up front. Is this segment going to be purely silly and goofy like our itchy forehead example? Is it going to be dark but self-aware, acknowledging the absurdity? Is it satirical, aiming for social commentary? Trying to be all of those things at once or switching wildly between them without warning is often where you lose your audience and your message gets completely muddled. Consistency is absolutely key to building trust and managing expectations. Your audience needs to know roughly what kind of ride they're signing up for.
Okay, establish the tone. Got it. Then what? If I've decided my tone is, say, dark but self-aware, can I just throw out anything that fits that as long as I think it's funny?
No, definitely not. That's where the next crucial step comes in. You need to create really clear boundaries and ideally communicate them. Explicitly forbid content, whether from yourself or audience submissions, that targets protected classes, that sexualizes minors, that should be obvious but worth stating, or that encourages actual self-harm or illegal acts in reality. Make these rules known if you're taking suggestions. Ultimately, you are responsible for the content you amplify, and setting these boundaries protects both your audience and yourself.
Okay, set the tone, define the boundaries. How about structuring the questions themselves within a segment? Do I immediately go for the most outlandish, extreme thing I can possibly think of to grab attention?
Generally, no. As we said, that can become boring or off-putting fast. Instead, it's often better to use escalation wisely. Maybe start with milder, slightly quirky options and then gradually escalate to more absurd or perhaps slightly darker choices as the segment progresses. Surprise is often funnier than predictability, and building up the absurdity gives the audience a chance to warm up, get comfortable, and get on board with your specific brand of humor for that segment. Ease them into the weirdness.
Like a comedic incline. Makes sense. What about keeping things moving?
Absolutely critical, especially online. Edit for pace. Particularly for social media platforms, tight clips, think 20 to 60 seconds tend to perform best. Keep the dialogue concise, impactful, and moving forward. No one wants to sit through 5 minutes of you agonizing over a single hypothetical choice in a short-form video. Get to the choice, get to the funny rationale, move on.
And what if, despite my best efforts, a question does seem to hit too close to home or feels like it might be crossing a line unintentionally? Is there a way to recover gracefully?
Definitely. You should always try to include a safety valve in your back pocket. If a question you pose, or one that comes in live, feels like it has the potential to be genuinely triggering or just too intense for the moment, have a prepared way to handle it. That could be a simple phrase like, you know what, let's take a beat on that one, or maybe let's skip that one, or even having a lighter alternative question ready to pivot to immediately. It shows you're being thoughtful, you're reading the room, even a virtual one, and it puts your audience at ease, signaling that you prioritize their comfort over just getting a reaction.
That's smart. Having an eject button ready. What about making the answers themselves funnier?
Yes, crucially, encourage creative rationale. Remember we said the why is often funnier than the what. The most memorable and often funniest answers come from the explanation of why a choice was made, not just the choice itself. So as a host, you should actively probe the reasoning behind a choice. Don't just take the answer, ask why that one, or walk me through your logic there. Foster that deeper engagement, because that's where the comedic gold often lies.
Get them to justify the absurdity. Love it. Okay, final point.
And finally, if you're doing this interactively, invite audience participation, but moderate diligently. Encourage engagement, comments, live suggestions, that's part of the fun. But be absolutely prepared to actively moderate those comments and live reactions to prevent harassment, offensive contributions, or things that violate your established boundaries. Your community space should feel safe and respectful, and that often requires active, consistent moderation on your part. Don't just let the chat run wild.
Okay, that's an excellent, really comprehensive toolkit. It provides a clear roadmap for creating responsible and engaging Would You Rather content. Could you maybe give us a quick example of how a segment like this might be structured in practice, say for a 60 to 180 second clip, just so people can really visualize it?
Sure thing. A typical sample segment structure could look something like this. You'd start with a quick hook, presenting the dilemma clearly and concisely, maybe with a slight vocal inflection or a sound effect to build anticipation. Okay, team, would you rather? Then optionally, you could add a one-line framing or a humorous setup to quickly set the scene, like, all right, this one came in from listener Crazy Cat Lady 82, and it's a doozy. Next come the rapid answers. Each host or guest states their choice, followed by a very concise, maybe 5 to 15 second rationale. Quick hits. After everyone's answered, maybe a bit of playful probing, a short, engaging back and forth debate, or further questioning about the reasoning behind a particularly weird choice. Wait, you really picked the singing. Why? Then you wrap it up with a closing punch. Maybe one host delivers a final absurd twist, a callback to an earlier point, or just a quick funny sign-off for that question. And finally, if appropriate, a call to action, CPA. You could invite the audience to comment with their choice, or send in their own worst hypotheticals for next time, but always, always clearly state the established rules and boundaries you've set for submissions. Send us yours, but keep it cleanish, folks.
That's super helpful. Breaking it down like that makes it seem much more manageable.
And just to reiterate on the rules and safety front, it's really crucial for creators to have a mental safety checklist for platforms like YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, and just general community guidelines in mind. Remember, do not depict, encourage, or provide instructions for real self-harm. Avoid or very carefully contextualize any violent sexual content. Never ever sexualize minors. Do not promote hate speech or the dehumanization of protected groups based on ethnicity, religion, gender identity, etc. If you do decide to discuss genuinely sensitive topics like trauma or assault, which probably isn't ideal for a lighthearted WYR segment, but if it comes up, include clear trigger warnings beforehand and consider providing links to relevant support resources. And finally, a technical tip. Ensure your transcripts or captions are accurate if you use them, as platform moderation often flags content based on keywords, and out-of-context clips or inaccurate transcriptions can be easily misunderstood and flagged incorrectly.
These guidelines are absolutely vital for responsible content creation today, covering both the ethical side and the practical platform survival side. Okay, one last thing on creation. What about keeping the format fresh? I can imagine just asking standard would you rather questions might get a bit stale over time. Any creative tools or variation ideas?
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of ways to keep it fresh and avoid it becoming repetitive. Here are a few creative tools and variation ideas. You could try a role-play variant. Hosts or guests have to answer the hypothetical questions while staying in character, maybe as historical figures, celebrities, fictional personas. Imagine Genghis Khan answering, would you rather have tiny hands or giant feet?
Ah! Okay, that could be funny.
Or a constraint challenge. Introduce specific arbitrary rules that force creative answers, like, for this round you could only last twice, or your answer must rhyme, or you have to justify your choice using only movie quotes. These constraints force people off their usual patterns. An audience vote remix is great for interaction. Present a hypothetical, let your viewers vote in real time, and then challenge the host to convincingly defend the least popular option chosen by the audience. This forces really unique arguments and perspectives. For a shift towards edutainment, you could use a moral lens. Take a seemingly comedic hypothetical and briefly pivot to discuss the underlying ethical dilemma, transforming it into a short, thought-provoking segment. And for video formats, definitely consider physical improv. Encourage hosts or guests to use physical comedy or visual representations of the choices in the studio. Acting out the scenarios, even briefly, makes for great visual gags, fantastic thumbnails, and incredibly shareable clips. The possibilities are truly endless if you approach it with a playful and creative mindset.
That's a fantastic list. Loads of actionable advice there for anyone looking to use Would You Rather effectively and responsibly and keep it interesting. It really underscores again how much depth there is to this seemingly simple concept and this incredible adaptability, this power it has. It suggests that Would You Rather is really far from just being a passing fad, doesn't it? It feels like it's evolving right alongside our technology and our culture, opening up even more fascinating avenues for the future. Hashtag tag 8. The future of hypotheticals and concluding thoughts. Wow. We've journeyed from ancient philosophers in Athens pondering deep ethical questions all the way to viral TikToks asking about, itchy foreheads or singing every single word you utter. It's been quite the ride through millennia of human thought, social interaction, and just weirdness. But what's next for this deceptively simple game? Where does Would You Rather go from here? How might it continue to evolve, especially with technology racing ahead? And what kind of questions does it still pose for us as humans trying to navigate an increasingly complex and interconnected world?
That's the big question, isn't it? A trajectory of Would You Rather so far definitely hints at some exciting and also potentially complex future applications. It seems deeply intertwined with emerging technologies and our ongoing human curiosities. It feels like a format that's perfectly poised to integrate with whatever the next wave of innovation brings.
So, what might that look like? What are some potential future directions or maybe research questions?
Well, looking ahead at future directions and research questions, we can certainly envision things like AI-generated hypotheticals. Imagine sophisticated AI models generating increasingly crazy, maybe even personalized dilemmas tailored for interactive experiences. This could offer practically endless variety, constantly adapting to user preferences, maybe even learning what specific types of questions resonate most with an individual user based on their past choices.
Whoa, personalized Would You Rather from an AI. That's interesting. And maybe a little creepy.
It could be both. The huge caveat there, of course, is that this would crucially require incredibly robust AI moderation and ethical safeguards to prevent the generation of harmful, offensive, or inappropriate content. That's a significant technical and ethical challenge. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. Infinite creativity, perhaps, but also infinite potential for unintended harm if it's not managed extremely carefully.
Right. AI needs guardrails, especially with something like this. What about VR or AR?
Oh yeah. Then there's the truly immersive possibility of VR experiential hypotheticals. Envision immersive virtual or augmented reality experiences where audiences could quite literally inhabit the outcomes of their choose your absurdity decisions.
Like actually feel the itchy forehead or hear yourself singing.
Maybe. You could truly feel the simulated weight or the humor or the awkwardness of your choices, experiencing the consequences in a visceral simulated environment. This could elevate the game from just a thought experiment to a genuinely embodied one, where your choices have a simulated, tangible reality. It could be incredibly powerful for entertainment or even empathy training.
That sounds potentially amazing and also maybe terrifying, depending on the question. What about more academic uses?
Absolutely. The format continues to offer fertile ground for cross-disciplinary research. Psychologists could use gamified hypotheticals online to probe moral intuition at scale, gathering vast data sets on human decision-making under various conditions much faster and more broadly than traditional lab studies allow. Sociologists could study how viral hypotheticals shape cultural norms and collective decision-making in real time, observing how groups form consensus or diverge online around certain dilemmas. It's like a living laboratory of human behavior playing out constantly on social media.
Those are truly thought-provoking possibilities, taking us far beyond just a simple party game. It really gets to the heart of how we process information, make decisions, and interact with each other. It also leads to some fascinating open research questions that we probably don't have answers to yet, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely. Big questions remain. For instance, how do repeated exposures to morally ambiguous comedy, even when it feels benign, actually affect an individual's real-world moral sensitivity or decision-making over the long term? Does it subtly desensitize us? Or does it, maybe paradoxically, make us more attuned to ethical nuances by constantly forcing us to consider them, even in jest? What are the specific design choices, the wording, the framing, the context that reliably maximize the hilariousness while simultaneously minimizing the potential for harm or negative impacts? That's a key question for responsible creators. And perhaps most profoundly, can carefully structured hypotheticals actually be designed to genuinely enhance empathy and understanding across deep political or social divides? Could forcing people to consider the other perspective, even in an absurd hypothetical, build bridges in a low-stakes, engaging way?
Yeah.
These are questions that will only become more relevant as these formats continue to proliferate.
Wow, deep stuff. It really forces a final reflection on what this whole phenomenon means.
It does. And that brings us nicely to a concluding reflection. Seeing Would You Rather as this double-edged mirror, that's what it truly is. This game, this format, it's deceptively simple in its structure, right? Just choose A or B. But it's profoundly complex in its impact. It's this ancient rhetorical form, dusted off, repurposed, and democratized as global entertainment, a genuine social microscope, allowing us to peer into the quirks and contours of human nature. At its core, it cleverly compresses our values, our fears, our social trespasses, our identity signaling, all into these bite-sized, forced choices. And it works so well because it brilliantly combines that cognitive surprise of incongruity, the thrill of safe transgression we talked about, and this incredibly rapid social signaling. It taps into fundamental human drives for connection, for understanding, for belonging, and maybe even for a little bit of safe rebellion, all within a playful framework. Ultimately, this game acts as a mirror, doesn't it? It reflects back to us what we fear, what we find gross or annoying, what we truly value, and maybe even what we secretly admire or aspire to about ourselves and about others. Our choices and our reasons for them reveal our deepest priorities, our unique sense of humor, and fragments of our moral compass. But as we've seen, this mirror is definitely double-edged. It holds the power to illuminate human nature, to foster connection through shared laughter and understanding. Or it holds the power to distort it, to reinforce harmful stereotypes, to trivialize suffering. Creators who choose to harness this format, thoughtfully operating with clear ethical boundaries, demonstrating genuine cultural sensitivity, and prioritizing creativity and wit over cheap shock, can keep the game firmly in the realm of playful human insight and meaningful connection. Done recklessly or thoughtlessly, however, it risks amplifying harm, eroding empathy, and generating unnecessary offense and division. The power, as always, is truly in the intent and critically in the execution. It's a tool, and like any powerful tool, its impact depends entirely on the hand and the mind that wields it. Hashtag outros.
What an incredible deep dive that was. Seriously fascinating. We've taken this amazing journey into the world of Would You Rather, haven't we? Exploring its surprising path all the way from ancient philosophical tools like Socrates' Olympus, right up to becoming this viral social media phenomenon that perfectly captures our collective attention spans today. We've uncovered those psychological hooks, incongruity, benign violations that make it so irresistible. We've looked at the social glue it provides for group bonding and figuring out group norms. We've touched on the crucial cultural nuances that shape how it's received around the world. And importantly, for many listening, we've outlined practical, actionable tips for creators on how to craft compelling, funny, and safe hypothetical scenarios that can entertain without causing unintentional harm. So here's a final thought to leave you with. The next time you encounter a would you rather question, whether it's completely silly or surprisingly serious, maybe just pause for a tiny moment. Consider not just your immediate answer, but maybe why that particular question was asked in that context. How does it make you feel? And what might it reveal, not just about the person asking it, but maybe even about yourself, your values, your fears, your sense of humor. Every choice, no matter how trivial it seems on the surface, offers this tiny little window into the incredibly complex interplay of human values, social norms, and the delicate, sometimes messy, art of shared experience. What will you choose to reflect?